Hi, everyone. It's me, Tim, and today I want to talk about what makes a good producer. This actually comes from a question from Phil SP26 who asks, I was wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing what makes a good producer. What are you looking for? And advice for those who plan on heading into that role. That is a very good question, Phil, because I'm always surprised at what people think they want in a producer, or even that they don't know what a producer is. The producer he's kind of at the top of the chain. Most people think the game director is, but in some ways the producer is, because they're handling everything that's going on and making sure it's getting done and interfacing with the publisher and interfacing with localization, interfacing with external groups that are doing work. You may have, maybe you've externed some of your art. They're handling all that stuff. Even if they have assistant producers who are directly handling it, they're managing those people. So producers do a lot of stuff. And you may think the answer I would give you is, I like a producer that does what I say. No. Producers need to be a little tough because they work with all kinds of different people, and they're the ones who often put their foot down and say, this has to be done, or it won't go into the game. Yeah, the game director does that a lot, but sometimes the producer is the one that even has to tell the game director, you're out of time, you're out of money, or that person isn't available anymore. They're moving on to something else. So either you're happy with that feature or we're cutting that feature. Decide. So if you don't think you could do that, you may not be a good producer. But I'm going to walk through, I think, 5 things a producer has to be good at, just to number them. The first one may seem obvious. I'm going to say good communication. But let me tell you how hard that is in game development. You have to have good communication skills, even with people who don't have good communication skills. There's a lot of naturally introverted people in the game industry, and you will have to learn to deal with all the different flavors of introversion that come. You will run into people, and these are people I've run into myself, who never want you to come in and talk to them. They want you to email them. Or they want you to Slack them. Or they want you to Slack them to get a time to come and talk to them. Or they only want you to come in and talk to them during certain hours of the day. Or they want you to only talk to them if you look on their desk and they don't have a little thing hanging on their monitor. But if that thing's hanging on the monitor, that means don't come in and bother me. Even if they sometimes forget to take that little thing off their monitor. So all day you don't talk to them because they've had that thing on the monitor. You just have to figure out how to work with all these people. And you may think some of this is just people are just getting so full of themselves, and you have to accommodate me, I don't need to accommodate you. But it's not. There's some of that, but it's not all that. I'll give you an example. I've talked about how when I program, I often have this big structure I'm building in my head, and I'm thinking about the structure, and I'm typing in, and I'm doing an algorithm, and I may not be typing continuously. I may go type, 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 type. I've had people they wait for me to finish typing and then they jump in with their question. The problem with that is it just caused that structure to break down, and it may take me 15 minutes to get back into that mode. That's the origin of why I started putting a comment ZZZ in my code, and then I realized whenever I got interrupted and I put a ZZZ, later I'd find bugs around. Bugs were always within a few lines of a ZZZ. So it's not necessarily it's a personality type, it's the work I'm doing. When I'm designing, you can probably interrupt me. If I'm programming, I'd prefer you not. But it's on me to let people know when and how they can come ask me questions. I can't just say, never come talk to me. You have to work out a system that works for you. And a producer is often the person you work that system out with. So, number one, a producer has to be a good communicator. And keep in mind, you'll be communicating with not just devs, but with publishers, with press, with management at the company. You will be dealing with a whole bunch of people and a whole bunch of roles, and you've got to be good at all of it because you're a producer. If that's what you want to do, that's what you're going to do. So that's the first one. Good communication is the first one. The second one is being organized. More than probably anyone else on the team, you have to be highly organized, because game development these days, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of half-finished things going into the game. Some because they've been asked, hey, put in what you've got. we can at least use it until it gets textured. Sometimes half-finished things go in because they literally want to test it. Hey, we've got it to a testable state. It's not done, but we can see how it works. You've got to track that. It's in the game, but not completed. Meanwhile, you have to track all the things that are in pipelines that are partially completed. And because these days, any particular feature or even asset that goes in the game isn't done by one person, you got to track that, and you got to know where everything is. And you have to know when you're approaching some kind of deadline, not a deadline set by a director or a deadline set by a publisher, a deadline that you yourself has realized is happening, because if something isn't taken to a certain completion state in time for someone else to take over and do this, and then someone else to take over and do their thing, you won't be done in time for a deadline that's months off. So it seems weird that you're going to someone going, you have to be done Friday, even though the deadline for this thing may be next month. And it's because there's a lot of people who need to use that feature or that asset after that person, and you're the one who knows it. You can't expect everyone working on it to know that, but the producer has to know it. They have to be the most organized person on the project. So that's the second thing. The third thing is they do have to be knowledgeable on game dev. I've met some producers who don't think that's true and have said things like, well, we might as well be making shoes. No. You need to know how game dev works. And I'll give you an example. Making 3D assets in today's games, first it's modeled. This is what 3D pipeline is. First it's modeled. Bunch of polygons shaped in a 3D software package. Then it's textured. Then it's rigged, which means bones are added if needed. And then it's animated. At each one of those stages, a lot of design has to be known. The modeler has to know what it's supposed to, how big it's supposed to be, and roughly shaped like, and well, exactly shaped. And then the texturer needs to know, well, what is it supposed to look like, and what environments is it in, and is it supposed to stand out, or is it supposed to blend in? And then the rigger needs to know what parts of it need to move. Does it need to, you might have a creature that doesn't need to be rigged around its face as much as a person because it's not expected to make expressions. And then you have something else that's like, no, I want this to be highly expressionable. And then finally you have an animator who needs to know, who gets all these things and needs to know what animations are needed. Because maybe this thing doesn't have a death animation, it's never going to be attacked. Or maybe it needs multiple death animations depending on what damage type is used to kill it. All these things have to be known by the time they get to that stage in the 3D pipeline. But here's a kicker. Can any of those things be done at the same time? Once the model's done, can the one person texture it while another person rigs it? Producer needs to know that, because you need to know, if you look on a schedule and you see rigging and texturing happening on the same model at the same time, that if that's possible. And if not, you're the one who brings up, hey, I think this is a problem. Now, yes, the lead artist or your art director should have caught that too, but the producer is ultimately the one who makes and manages the schedule. They need to know that. So, knowledgeable on game dev is number 3. The fourth one is being proactive. I have a whole video on how people should be proactive, but wow, is that important for a producer. You shouldn't wait for problems to happen. You should look ahead in the schedule. Look for choke points. Look for things that are being planned to be done, but oh no, this thing that was being planned is by a person who's on vacation then, or this person's out on leave then, or this person just quit, and you check your schedule and it's like, uh-oh, next month you were planning to use them to do this asset. You don't wait to get to the point where that person is needed and then go, oops, I guess we don't do that. You're constantly checking the schedule. You're constantly looking for things that can be a problem and trying to take care of it early enough. The time to look for someone to replace someone who's quitting isn't when you realize there's an asset you needed for your game from them. It's way earlier than that. It's early enough to do it, put out a job notice, get people applying, run through interviews, set a hire date, get them on board, get them up to speed. I mean, it could be months. So yes, proactive is super important for producers. And then finally, deadlines. Producers have to be really good at deadlines. They have to be good at figuring them out, and they have to be good at enforcing them. And this means the producer, and this goes back to communication, they'll be looking at deadlines that publishers set, because here's how much money you have, or here's when we expect to have a demo, or here's when we want to see a vertical slice. You will have deadlines set by press. Hey, press is coming in and they're going to want to see a walkthrough. So the game has to be stable, and we have to have a region where we can do a walkthrough and we can show off several features in the game that I've met with the game director, and these are the features we're showing off at the press. So here's a new deadline for everybody. Localization imposes a lot of deadlines. If you're going to be localizing, translating text in the game to different languages, that stuff should be locked. If narrative designers are still writing dialogues, or they haven't figured out how a quest is going to end, so they're going to add stuff, or they're still playtesting an area, and you've decided, well, let's move this object from this area to this area, which changes what people say, instead of them telling you to go north or telling you to go south, that should be done before localization begins. That's an internal deadline that nobody will impose on you, but a producer is expected to figure out and set. So, good at making, setting, and enforcing deadlines is number 5. I think if you think you'll be good at those 5, you'd be a good producer. Of course, a good way of figuring that out is to go to a company and be an assistant producer. Now, assistant producers, sometimes they're hired. Sometimes they come from other disciplines. That's why a lot of things on here, good communication, organization, knowledgeable on game dev. If you were a QA person or an artist and you decide, I think I want to do production, great. I've met some great producers who came from programming or design or other disciplines, but a lot of them I met wanted to be a producer from the very beginning because they were good at organization and communication. That's a good first step. Just don't forget the other 3 things. So I hope, Phil SP, this answers your question.